Hail, hail. Good evening, folks, and welcome along to this special rewind episode of the Endless Celts Podcast. My name's Anthony, one of the show regulars, and tonight, delighted to be joined by Captain of the Endless Celts himself, Mr. Stephen Tomlinson. How are you, mate?
All good, my man. I think we've got some news to break out among the people. As people can see here on the screen, we've got a brand new sponsor, and that's Beer 52. We're absolutely delighted to have them on board. A company who I've used before during lockdown and stuff. So I want to show you all something fresh in the post. Fresh in the post today, boys. The box itself. Look at that.
Fantastic.
Smart, isn't it? I mean, in this box as well, you get 8 different types of beers. You can mix between light ales, dark ales, a mixture of everything. And then on us, by the way, you get your free case by going to beer52.com/Celts. And just they kind of go through this. It's absolutely mental, by the way. Just nuts. I love a craft beer.
Never seen a man look so happy getting a box of beer.
He's loving it.
100%. I mean, look at this. Look at all the different stuff. Unbelievable. 2 chefs brewing. Wonderful. We'll have Molester Fruel. I can't really say that properly, but again, another foreign beer on the incredible. And you also get snacks. You get snacks to wash it all down with. I got pretzels. Incredible as well. And I think for myself, I'm going to crack open one.
Yeah, great
on the podcast to celebrate.
Right. It's a rewind episode, why not? And,
exactly.
Also joining us tonight, so we're delighted from the Bhoycie bus, one of our good friends, Mr. Bustalgia himself, Phil McGinlay. How are you, my friend?
I'm good, mate. I've got no products to sell like a salesman here, Stephen. That was fantastic, mate. But one thing I can do tonight, I can tick Anthony off my bingo card. My Endless Celts bingo card is almost full. I just need John Tomlinson to complete the set because I've been on screen with everybody else in Endless Celts apart from John. He's still running from me. He's the only one I need. But yeah, Anthony, you're now ticked off the list as well, mate.
As we're almost there.
I'll tell you one thing. Sorry to interrupt. You also get a lovely magazine.
Oh, look at this.
And do you know what this does? It tells you all the different things of the beer, and you get a different thing each month. And as I said, use our code, beer52.com/Celts. Claim your free case of beer. Only have to cover the postage, which is great. I mean, this beer is great. I love an ale. Anyone else who loves an ale, get on it. It's absolutely fantastic. And thanks again, Beer52, for sponsoring the show.
I'm just delighted that you're branching out on reading different kinds of magazines now, Stephen. But so the reason we're here tonight, guys, is obviously we're delighted to be back dining at the top table in the Champions League this year. So we thought it'd be best, it'd be a good wee idea that when the opportunities arise to go and look back at some of our previous ventures in the top tournament. We started off a few weeks back. We looked at our debut season, 2001-2002. When we first ventured into the Champions League group stages for the first time. And tonight we're going to be looking back to season 2003-2004, which happened on the back of an historic run to the UEFA Cup final in Seville. That was the original trip. Don't be fooled by all these, second-rate imitations that we've had in recent times. That's following on for that, we went into our final season having the likes of a certain Mr. Larsson at our disposal. And just before we kind of get much further into the sort of way of looking back on how we got on, I'm going to come to you first, Stephen. 25 years this season since he signed. I think he wasn't too bad a player, was he?
I mean, up until about 3 years ago, I was still having through the doors. He was absolutely an incredible player, the best player. I mean, we've talked about him loads of times. He's the best player of my lifetime supporting Celtic. Just the way he was, the way he conducted himself, the fact that all these different clubs were after him at one point, like United, teams like that. He publicly admitted that as well. And he stayed with us because he wanted to be with Celtic Football Club, and he played his best football in his prime years with us, which I think speaks a lot. In European football, I think he still holds the record for a Scottish club for goals scored, if I'm correct. So, again, he was fatal to everything. Do you know what I mean? He was the king of kings. And what else? What more can you say about the fella? He was incredible. And then obviously the story. I mean, you spoke about a film when you were last on about Jordan Larsson coming to the Celtic Park. That didn't come to fruition, but just to have Henrik through the doors at that point in time was incredible.
Yeah, you're absolutely bang on, Stephen. And I think, Phil, as Stephen touched on there, one of the things, apart from ability and goals scored and everything else, why he's always treasured that little bit more than perhaps most. And we've had some great strikers since, but it was the fact that we knew he was, anyone with half a football brain could see he was a world-class talent. And yet, even with that, he gave us although he went on to win the Champions League and the English Premier League after leaving us, he did still give us his peak years, didn't he?
He did. I think it speaks volumes for the guy and how much he loved the club that he still says to this day he cannot watch the UEFA Cup final back again. Guys won the Champions League with Barcelona, but it's like that game with the one that he regrets, that UEFA Cup. Obviously, Champions League's a big one, but yeah, he says to this day he still can't watch it back. I think that speaks volumes how much he loved the club and how much we loved him as well. Because, yeah, I feel his pain there. I find it very hard to look back at. I don't know. I've seen the goals since, but yeah, fair play to the guy if he can't watch it again, because it was a sore one. Of course, the time period we're talking about tonight is right smack bang in that moment as well, just after it, the 2003-2004 season. But he's something else, man. You could do a whole 3-4 hour podcast about Henrik Larsson on his own, just like, what a guy. It's every type of goal, world-class player, and not to be overlooked, just he was playing in Scotland. That's always the weirdest part. So many people down south in particular, he's only doing it because he's playing in Scotland. No. You've got to understand this guy was different gravy. Absolutely cut from a different cloth, man, honestly.
He was different gravy, as they say. Just an absolute, it was a privilege to watch him, it really was. But, this was going to be his final season in Celtic colours. But I have to say, he signed off in some the most stylish of styles, because Umbro that season unleashed an absolute tremendous away kit. We were talking about it off air, Stephen. The original Black Magic away kit, for anyone that can't remember, it was the original black one that had the gold trim sort of down the shoulder area that sort of morphed into like a little Umbro sort of sign near the end. It was an absolute belter, and we've had a few incarnations of it since, but for me, the 2004 version still reigns supreme. What about you, Stephen?
I mean, that kit strikes like vivid in my mind, because I got Petrov on the back of it. I remember the gold letters. It was incredible to look at, and it actually felt nice on. Do you remember wearing it? It felt like a clothy type material. It wasn't like stuck to you or like a silicone or whatever. It was a fantastic kit, and as you said, there's been plenty of times where it's been trying to recreate it and different kind of looks on it, but that kit was incredible. And it's kind of, you can see the legs of Lenny in it, you can see Thompson playing in it, you can even see Janino as well. He played in it, didn't he? I believe. I think
it became the third kit the following season, and Janino signed, and I'm sure you're right, he definitely featured in it. I'm sure he did.
You can picture the players in it. It's one of them kits that strike your mind, because you can picture everything, and it was a brilliant kit.
I remember they brought out a very similar version in Brendan's first season, Phil. It was the black, but it was. I thought it was almost like, it was as if you bought a fake one of the original in Turkey. It didn't quite have the same wow factor, but it was. I was definitely a fan of it. What about yourself?
Obviously, I had that. In fact, I liked the pink kit as well that season. I liked going to be a bit out there with it, but it's no coincidence. Every black kit always feels just dead clean looking and like really sharp. The other one that springs to mind is 2012-13, the black one with tennis across the front. It had the tricolour on the underside of the sleeve. I remember Lenny with the trackie on and the collar.
Oh, I remember that.
A skinhead Lenny with the big tricolour collar sticking out. And I'm just like, that's the Neil Lennon that I like. This is all. Right. Yeah, but that was the black kit that was associated with as well. Because black kits and Celtic just seem to go really, really well together down the years.
Absolutely, that was biblical. That tracksuit, I loved it. And like you say, of all managers that we had at the time, it was Lenny. It was an absolute cracker. You're bang on, Egyptian King. But we'll get back to we'll get right into the football, guys. And I'm not going to dwell too much on something that's normally an Achilles heel for us, the qualifying phase, because it was a relatively stress-free campaign that year. Both 4-0 away from home victories and reversal of a 1-0 win at Celtic Park. So normally the other way around. But back then our away form, certainly in the UEFA Cup, was absolutely fantastic. And any potential banana skins were absolutely avoided. Started off playing with Kaunas. That was at the opening match. And once we got rid of them, we took on MTK Hungary, which was obviously the Daily Record and the Sun were getting their pen sharpened. They were looking forward to us potentially splitting up again, another FC Basel moment. But the game was essentially over by the hour mark when we were 3-0 up, and we scored one just right at the end to make it 4. Chris Sutton scored the goal in the return leg at Parkhead. Just a pretty. It's one of the games. Just get it out of the way, and we can look forward to the group stage draw. But yeah, as qualifying campaigns go, it was definitely one of the easier ones, and we got our passport to the group stages. It was the first time in history that both Celtic and Rangers, remember them, were in the group stages at the same time. So it was a little bit of history this season in more ways than one. But we were drawn in Group A that year, alongside the likes of the Behemoths that are Bayern Munich. But another team that maybe some of the younger viewers might only think PSG have been doing this since time began. But Phil, you remember, anyone that remember right, Lyon back then, they were the absolute top dogs in France. Had some amazing players managed by future Rangers manager Paul Le Guen. They were always. I always kind of call them sort of like the Atletico Madrid of this generation. They're maybe never going to win it, but they're always there or thereabouts, and they were always a sort of decent outside bet. They were a cracking team, weren't they?
Aye, this is the Lyon side. I think in the mid 2000s won like 7 titles on the bounce. After Le Guen left, Gerard Houllier goes there and continues it. They win a few because PSG were. Yeah, until they got the money coming in the 2010s, they were always an all right team in France. But Lyon had that period in the 2000s, unbelievable. And the talisman for them is Juninho, but it's not the Juninho that played for us. Oh, no. It's a different Brazilian Juninho. But if you think free kicks, thought Nakamura was good. My God, Nakamura was good. This guy, I think, has the record for like the most free kicks scored in French League and in the Champions League and stuff like that. He was absurd that he was playing against us in this campaign, if I remember it rightly.
Yeah, he was. He was always one of the standout players for Lyon. Like you say, a dead ball specialist, as we found out, sadly, to our detriment. But what can you do? And our other group opponents were Anderlecht. So we made up Group A of the Champions League that year, and I think we can safe to say that confidence was pretty high on the back of a really good debut run, where it was sort of Game 6 heartache against Juventus, where we did everything right. We won the match as best, but it was just the sort of results didn't go our way on the other side. And then obviously our UEFA Cup run the season after that, I think confidence was pretty high going into the tournament that we could progress out the group. We certainly had the players to do it. And I'll come right back to you, Phil, because the opening match of that campaign was in the old Olympic Stadium in Munich in September 2003, where we took on the mighty Bayern Munich in the opening game and went 1-0 up early in the second half. Brilliant header for Alan Thompson. And we just thought it was just another day on the road. We've had Liverpool and the likes that some of the rest of them put to the sword. We thought Bayern Munich was just going to be the latest scalp. But unfortunately, their big summer signing of that year, Roy Mackay, the Lewandowski off his era, sadly put us to the sword.
I think our own goalkeeper put us to the sword that night, but yeah, I can remember the Alan Thompson header at the back post. Did he not score a goal quite similar against Stuttgart the season before in the UEFA Cup run, back post header? And it's like, but it looked so much like we were going to get it. I mean, obviously, this is only our second venture at the Champions League at this point. But as the years would go on, the away thing would become more and more of it's always weighing in the back of your mind. But yeah, that close to getting that first away win. And what a win it would have been in the Munich Olympic Stadium. Jeez, I mean, the likes of Rafe Rovers and Norwich have won there. Celtic could have been added to that list of prestigious names. But yeah, in the end, Roy Mackay with that with that goal at the the one from 35 yards or something. He just has a pot shot.
Well, that's the thing. The first goal's one of real beauty because Stan Varga sort of heads it out, just gets out the danger area, and of all the people you don't want to fall at the bang on the volley, Roy Mackay. I mean, Hedman had no chance with that one, but it was a video nasty. The second goal, like you say, it was just one of those balls into the box. I don't even know if it was a shot. I think it was one of those cross-come shots, and Hedman gets nowhere near it. So it was heartbreak on game one, which sadly, as we've just discussed there, it's been pretty much the status quo in all our years since. We've never won our opening fixture in the Champions League group stages, unfortunately. So you always feel like you're playing catch-up. But Stephen, my big brother once famously said regarding that era, regarding Big Rab and Magnus Hedman, he says, God, if we'd had Bhoycie a couple of years earlier, we'd have probably won the UEFA Cup and beat Bayern Munich away from home. Do you think that's a tad unfair? Or I know you've always got a soft spot for dodgy keepers, so I thought you state your case for the defence.
First of all, I do want to address something. Craig White and Stephen, why is the membership paused? I'll look into that. I'll have to speak to John. I did have no issue why or what would be paused, but I'll get that checked for you and let you all know. In terms of the keepers, and if I go back to the Bayern Munich game as well, the Rafe thing baffled me, by the way, Phil. What about Nelly's? I didn't know they won
Rafe and
there.
Norwich beat them in the UEFA Cup during the 90s at the Olympic Stadium.
That's incredible.
There's a famous picture, isn't there, at Starks Park? It's at Bayern Munich 0, Red Rovers 1.
Aye.
That's incredible. But, if you go back to it, and this is our second venture into the Champions League, and you just look at the calibre of players we're playing against, like Oliver Kahn, what a goalkeeper he was. You have Ballack in midfield, you have Hargreaves, Pizarro, Santa Cruz up top, Mackay, who was a lethal poacher at that time in European football, and I think he's the assistant manager. We were discussing off air of our nearest rivals across the city. So there's a bit of history there. And then you look at our team. I thought, I spoke about this a lot with some friends of mine, Ryan McWilliams, who had done a rewind series with. If Celtic had won that UEFA Cup, do you think we could have went on and maybe challenged for the Champions League? That's another type of thing, because Porto done it and then they went and won it. Do you know what I mean? Obviously, they beat us, and off the back of that momentum, it continued on to Mourinho, and then they won the Champions League. Could that have happened to Celtic? Is that wishful thinking on our part? But back to the keep.
It's definitely wishful thinking, but I don't think it's as absurd as it maybe sounds now, if that makes sense. Yeah. Because, like you said, Porto went on to win it. We certainly had the players there to do it. I think Porto were technically a better side. I don't, in terms of skill, and the likes of Deco, just pulling the strings in that midfield. But I reckon if we had got to the last 16, shall we say, I think we would have fancied our chances against anybody in that era. Like you say, I think getting into the nitty gritty of it would have been a couple of bridges too far. But no, it's a fair point, Stephen. We certainly, I think with that team, I think a lot of that team feel that they underachieved in the Champions League. Yeah. And I think as we'll go on and we see that, it was sometimes just a case of one decision here or there that really did prove costly. But yeah, we certainly were a sort of juggernaut in Europe at that particular time.
I think Craig White and here, the board wouldn't have followed through. That could be true as well. We all know the issues that we have with the Celtic hierarchy. But back to what you were saying, the keepers like Hedman, Marshall. I see that debut Marshall had at the new camp. It was absolutely unbelievable. He was on fire. He saved everything. Obviously, you're playing off adrenaline. You didn't know you were going to play and all that type of stuff. And he was fantastic. And then you had Hedman, Douglas still around, and I like Magnus Hedman. I thought he was all right. He had a promising start to his career from what I've read up about him in terms of playing in English football, and then he obviously tailed off. They came to us, and that kind of decline continued. But there was potential there about him.
It was the Swedish number one at one point. He certainly arrived to a great fanfare, and there was a lot of money spent on him for back in terms of real terms for what we paid. And funnily enough, I might contradict myself a wee bit here, because the next game that we're going to mention, he actually did have a brilliant game at Celtic Park that night. It was more the away games where sadly he let us down. But Phil, you'll remember, as we talked earlier, that Lyon at that time were an absolutely fantastic team. And I still vividly remember driving through, or being in the car driving through to this game. And the media, even the Celtic supporters within the sort of broadcast media, were very much a case of this was going to be the first damage limitation job we were going to have in the Champions League. It was very much, if we can keep this to 2 or 3, then it would be pretty respectable. But fair play to Lyon, they did only keep it down to 2, because we absolutely produced the goods. It was one of it sometimes goes under the radar because perhaps some of the other results we've had have been the sort of sexier names, but I reckon if you can go back to that match against Lyon at Celtic Park as good a night as any as we've had. The atmosphere was incredible. Lyon played very well in the game. There's no two ways about it. Like I say, Magnus Hedman actually has 2 or 3 really good saves in it. But the last 20 minutes, a young Liam Miller came off the bench, and the rest is history.
The thing about Lyon as well, up until that point in Celtic football, the only thing they were associated with was the Henrik Larsson leg break, because they obviously were the team we were playing that night a few years before it. So I think Larsson went a long way that night to sort of exercise the demons of what happened against Lyon a few years before, because he obviously sets up both the goals. The Sutton one in particular is one of my favourite Larsson-Sutton combo goals, because they were amazing together, and Larsson was good with anyone he played alongside, but those two in particular, the link-up play, I believe it comes from maybe a throw-in, but Sutton passes out to Larsson, and if you watch the footage again, while Larsson's out on the left beating the fullback, you can see Sutton making a very direct run in a straight line. He just keeps it going. Larsson just looks up, clips the ball over. He doesn't need to break his stride, just gets a perfect header on it, nods it in the corner, and then the Lee Miller goal's pretty much from the same spot, same header, and it's Larsson again. And it's just, that night, that performance was fantastic. And I can also remember there was a Green Brigade banner years later in the Champions League where they had all of the tombstones of all the teams we'd beaten. I remember Lyon being one of the tombstones. It was like Juventus, AC Milan. Lyon, very justified. So they say they'd won 8 titles in a row or something in the mid-2000s in France. That was a big scalp for us to take. But yeah, that Larsson-Sutton link-up goal, I love that one so much. Love it.
It was such that this is a good. I mean, I know I don't like to give, especially the paper that he writes for, too much traction, but I always remember Bhoycie, Stephen, saying that it was the greatest European night up until that point that he'd ever experienced at Celtic Park, which I think probably just goes to show you the type of night it was. You could argue that with that blueprint had started a couple of seasons before in their first season in the Champions League. And then throughout the UEFA Cup run, some of the big teams we played on that run as well. But it was, again, just another one of those nights where it was that special atmosphere, that fortress, as you've often described it, that Celtic Park was back in those days. You turned up not fearing anybody.
Well, yeah, I mean, to point it as well, I was speaking to Phil off air, and there's a stat floating around saying among this group, we played a home game. It was our 100th and our 72nd win during a period of time. That's an incredible stat, to think that people came and they got beat that often because it was such a fortress. My only gripe is now that seems to have tailed off a bit. And you kind of, I know we've spoken about it before, Anthony, but I do feel there's a lot of tourist kind of attraction at Celtic Park in European nights where people wanted to be there for the You Never Walk Alone video and putting it on Twitter. It all looks pretty, it all looks good in pictures, but I want it back to that time where you have Martin O'Neill in a tracksuit, run up and down the lane, going mental. You've got the fans singing from start to finish, no stupid breaks in between. The Champions League anthem's going, the players are up for it, they're ready to rock and roll. You know, like, the atmosphere is fantastic. We all know it's well renowned, but we need to get that intimidation factor back again, where teams are scared to come to us. We did well against Real Madrid 100%, and they were too much for us in the end. But when we have like Leipzig and all coming up next and stuff, we need to really show our mettle and show we're a force against European football. But to tail back what we're saying about this game against Lyon, not going to pretend that anyone watching are used to as well. My memory's hazy, right? It's hazy. But what I can remember is the impact Liam Miller had coming off the bench. A young Irishman, absolutely fantastic. And he actually played a big part in Celtic's European run. He played in the qualifying rounds against Kunis and MTK as well. So he had a bit of pedigree there. And Martin Lead always kind of threw in a youngster, Maloney, or be a McGinalay later on, or it'll be, in this case, it'll be Liam Miller. And the fact he came on with no fear, you like to see that. With players, he came on and took a bit of scruff and neck. He was driving the midfield forward. He scored that headed goal, and then obviously that catapulted the Larsson, whipped it into the Sutton. He scores a header as well. So it was a fantastic performance. But the atmosphere again, to go back to it, just gripes me now that seems to have disappeared. And we do have obviously the famous sing songs, and the goosebumps come, but you just want the players to be frightened. You want them to know they're coming in for a game and not coming for a couple of pictures at Celtic Park to say this is a brilliant atmosphere. I hate that. I definitely agree on that front. Like you say, I reckon had McGregor's shot gone in that night against Madrid, that those decibel levels would have been raised again. But I do think, but obviously there's no shame in losing to Real Madrid. But I think you're bang on, Stephen. These next couple of games coming up, that's why maybe the away leg in Leipzig's so important as well. But yeah, that intensity has to be there, because it's always there at the start, but just sort of the way that results have went a little bit the last few years in Europe, it
it can die off a little bit quicker than we would like. So yeah, I think massive games coming up in this campaign. But
can I just say as well, sorry,
sure.
Monty's put in the chat, him and Ross like to have a bit of crack. He asked me, has Ross packed it in? Far from it, Monty. The big man's training for a marathon, which he's running this Sunday, so we're all wishing him well and wishing him good luck, and quite busy at the moment doing that, so we'll be back on soon, back on shortly.
Absolutely. I think the pair of them are missing each other, really, aren't they? They love each other, really. But so, Phil, we obviously have that incredible result against Lyon, where we had that kind of textbook home performance in the Champions League, where we stand up against all odds and come away with an amazing result and memories to last forever. And then a couple of weeks later, we had the textbook away performance in the Champions League, where this was going to be the night. Obviously, like you said, the textbook sort of away form was starting to have its starting to create headlines in the media. But we did think this was going to be the game. After everything we'd done against Lyon, after everything we'd done the year before in the UEFA Cup, this was going to be the night we were going to put some points on the board against a very, very average Anderlecht team. They were going to be no match for Larsson, Sutton, Hartson, Petrov et al. And then it all went tits up, and it was just one of the worst games of football I remember really watching Celtic play in Europe. It was dreadful.
From what I remember watching it, I think we had a fair few chances. It was one of those typical, we lost a shady, rubbish goal, typical goal that Celtic would lose away from home in Europe. I believe it was a Ivorian striker, Aruna Dunn, that was the one that haunted us that night. But I can remember going into that game and thinking they would be that we'll come away with a win there. No problem. Yeah, one of those ones where even when they scored, I think the commentators were even stunned that how could Celtic be losing this? Because I say we did squander chances again, and it's one of those just typical what would be the blueprint, as you said, going forward. Teams like Aalborg, there's one for your future rewind episodes. There's another one.
Looking forward to that episode.
There's always going to all the wee shady teams that beat us. The fourth seed team and all that. Yeah, and Anderlecht were in that category. Rosenborg the year before. Again it was Bratback that came to haunt us that time, and it just became part and parcel for Celtic in the Champions League campaigns. Copenhagen, there's another one coming up as well. So, it's always the same level of team.
It's going to be some laugh these next few episodes, isn't it? But no, although Patrick did, it is true, Celtic did have a goal chopped off in the first half in that game. And to say it was a sketchy decision, probably putting it mildly. The only saving grace we can maybe take for the night is we did look resplendent in that black away kit, I'm really clutching at straws. And
also as well, Vincent Kompany said that Larsson and Hartson were the toughest strikers he's played against in terms of when he was younger and that. So there's always that. And look at the defender he turned out to be. So take all the confident points there, Anthony.
Well, as the story goes, he was 17-year-old when he played against us in that Anderlecht team, and in the home game, apparently Alex Ferguson was in attendance to watch Vincent Kompany, but it was somebody else in a Celtic shirt that caught his eye that night, which is the game we were talking about. But he's been asked about, when Kompany said about who's the toughest opponent he played against, apparently John Hartson is the name that he always brings up because he ragdolls him in the home game in particular. So, tough opponent for him.
Absolutely. So it left us with 3 points from the first 3 games, and this was obviously what we were always going to be doing, playing catch up. But we did hope, with the fact that with 2 home games coming up, that we could kind of claw those results back. And certainly on match night 4, we certainly gave ourselves a huge boost, the chance of getting through into the next round. It was, you could probably argue, the most complete first half, especially performance ever Celtic have had in the Champions League. It was, but you're bang on, Patrick. It was bonfire night that night. It was like the streets of Baghdad driving into through Glasgow that night. It's all you heard was crackles. It was unbelievable. But it did have that kind of buzz that you could maybe argue that we had against Rangers back in February there. That sort of driving in midweek, everybody up for it. The stadium was full for quite early doors. And I actually think there might even have been. In fact, no, sorry, I'll take that back. That's the next episode we do. I'm sure the Undertones were playing pre-match, but I think that was against AC Milan the following season. But the place was absolutely jam-packed, and in a first half first half an hour, we absolutely blew Anderlecht away. We were 3-0 up, and it's no suffice to say it could have been more than that. Henrik scored what proved to be his last Champions League goal for Celtic that night. A brilliant little cushioned header from Didier Agat. Liam Miller, as we're about to sort of chat about him, he had probably his finest time in a Celtic jersey. He absolutely ran the show in the middle of the park, and we thought we have got an absolute diamond here. And of course, Big Sutton rounded it off in 27 minutes. We were in absolute dreamland. And I would say, yep, it's again like Lyon. It maybe goes under the radar, Phil, but that night is definitely up there for me. It was an absolutely fantastic performance.
Aye, it is, especially after starting with a loss. Suddenly we're right back in the driving seat again, back-to-back win of the 2 wins. So 6 points after 4 games. So we're right in about it again. We've got Bayern Munich coming up, so the confidence is high. Again, you think, we don't fear anybody, but the performance against Anderlecht that night was phenomenal. And I can remember now when you're saying that, it was a first half where we just blew them away. In the second half, I think we kind of took the foot off the gas a wee bit because they did get one back and there was a wee few dodgy moments. But overall, controlled the game and put ourselves right in with a chance of qualification now because Liam Miller in particular, absolutely diamond. You know that we've discovered an amazing player coming through our youth system as well. Obviously, it was about to change. A minute ago, I was saying like Ferguson was in attendance and came up to watch Vincent Kompany. Came away, obviously, but I think Roy Keane also played a part in that one, as the story goes. Yeah. But at that time, we weren't to know, but the future was looking very, very bright. And the team was really ticking over well at that point. So, yeah, we were totally right to be very confident about our chances here in this group now, where we were sitting after 4 games.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you say, Anderlecht did pull one back in the second half, but it was a mere consolation. I always remember it was a penalty kick. And I'm really contradicting my Magnus Hedman part of earlier on here because Magnus Hedman made an absolutely tremendous save for the penalty and the rebound. It was almost the ball was almost under him and he scooped the rebound away as well. But it's just his luck that it fell to the Anderlecht. I think it was Aruna again actually that ends up putting it in the end. And I think that just kind of summed up Magnus's luck at Celtic, even when he had a great. Yeah, the ball still ended up in the back of the net, but what can you do? And that set up an absolutely, doesn't get any more box office than, the 4th-time European champions as they were then, Bayern Munich, coming to town. Fantastic night. But as, of course, we all rolled up, we thought this is what we do. We take on the big teams at Celtic Park and we blow them away. And to be fair, we had a good game that night. And I always remember that wee flick on from Chris Sutton, just in the 88th minute, and everyone thought it was in. It hits the side netting, which is unfortunate. But Stephen, what I remember most about that game, aside from the amazing affair and the Bayern fans that night were absolutely magnificent as well, was the Bayern Munich players at the end of the game. Actually, you would have thought they'd actually won the tournament that night. That's how big a scalp not losing at Celtic Park was at that time. They were jumping about, celebrating. They went right up to the Bayern fans and they were doing the arms up, doing sort of ole kind of thing. It was unbelievable. But that's like what you say. It's just that's just the kind of venue Celtic Park is.
That needs to come back. That needs to see that to have players celebrating as draw, as you said. That needs to come back to Celtic Park instead of letting the likes of Cluj or Anderlecht, Copenhagen, whoever it may be, come and claim a scalp. It needs to be back when you're beating these teams on the regular and people are scared to come. And I think on the research I've done, I hope this is a tick point, Sven-Goran Eriksson was in attendance looking at Chris Sutton and Thompson potentially for Lignan squad at that time as well. Do you know what I mean? Even though personally I think they should have had so many more caps for that country. It's unbelievable. They've been overlooked because of the league to play in, but they've done it in European football. What I love as well, it's kind of the romance of it all. Yes, regardless if it was a 0-0, whatever, but it's the fact that these players have been called no marks, so they're not good because they play in a certain league. They can dominate teams. You have Farge, you have Balde, just being absolute monsters at the back. Players were afraid of them all the time, couldn't near them. Then you have Liam Miller coming in, a young player, young guy, as you said, a diamond of a player. Lenny and Petrov, Lambert and all. So, I mean, absolutely fantastic players. And then up the top of the pitch, Larsson, who Egyptian King rightly said, even when Larsson went to United, it was so hard to hate him because he was a true legend. He 100% was. These players were pure quality. And I love the fact that likes of Chris Sutton came from a bad time in England, people writing him off, and he'd done it for us in European football. He'd done it for us against the big teams. He was absolutely fantastic. And the whole Bayern Munich, we've had some cracking games against Bayern Munich. A couple of years ago, remember Cal McGregor scored against them? I think Rodgers was there.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes.
We could have held on and won that game, but unfortunately we didn't. And that's what I'm bringing it back to. We need to find that bit where we can hold on and take it, the impetus, and keep it. And whether it's a draw or a 1-0 win, bring it back again, because Celtic Park, we all know it. We've seen it today. It was published in the top 30 attendances in the world. So the fans come. The fans are back in the team. The players just need to find a way to make it a fortress like only his team did at that time.
Yep.
I think that was one of the sort of main strengths for Wins, that not just that obviously the fans being the 12th man and everything, you know, that we say about that. This was a team that was packed with skillful players, as like you say, Liam Miller, Paul Lambert, a Champions League winner, Stilian Petrov. All these guys had all the skill in the world, and did the likes of obviously Henrik and Sutton as well. But they were nobody on planet Earth was going to bully these guys, no matter who they were playing against.
I think as well the attitude of that team as a collective, a lot of them had a bit of a chip on their shoulder, which isn't a bad thing. Myself and Russell have talked about it before, doing Bustalgia, talked about Larsson. Larsson did have an arrogance about him, but that's not necessarily bad. He just believes his own ability. Same with Cristiano Ronaldo nowadays. The guy just knows he's good. Larsson knew it. Sutton, he had a chip on his shoulder at a point to prove. Guys like Tomlinson, Petrov, Lambert, Lennon, these guys were all big characters. You've seen like the open goal interviews that like Darren Adie's done, and says how he used to get wound up as a youth player. They would all, bam him up when he'd come into the dressing room and stuff like that. And it's like that era of player is gone now in modern day football. You don't get that now in a dressing room. Every player wants to be mollycoddled and managed really like micromanaged. So they all can only play one position, and they all care about likes on Instagram. But see, this collective team, I see Sutton, Hartson, Petrov, Lambert, Lennon, just huge characters. And I think that helped them massively, because they were like, nah, we're not going to be roll over here and have our belly tickled by whoever comes to town. We're going to if they're going to win, they're going to have to fucking earn it from us, basically. So that was the attitude that team had, and it went a long way. It really did. And you see it on nights like, during this campaign at Celtic Park in particular. And the fact Bayern Munich were celebrating getting a 0-0 draw. It shows how much they knew that they had to earn that draw at the end of it.
Do you think Anthony as well, and even Phil, maybe a two-pronged one here? Do you think that we look at Postecoglou's team now, and it's fantastic, and we always talk about the collective, right? And you mentioned that, Phil, the collective. Do you think this is the best collective unit we've had since O'Neill? Maybe there's not as many like characters in terms of Petrovs, Lennons, but you still have Yakimakis, Joe Hart, Carter Vickers, Cal McGregor. There's personality in the team now, I think.
I'd say the only one that's between that and O'Neill is probably one of Lennon's squads, maybe like the one with like Hooper, Stokes, Commons, Mulgrew. There was a bit of a good camaraderie there, which of course became a detriment for the next manager that came in and took over and tried to change so much, Ronnie Dyler. It was the click that ended up forcing him out a wee bit in the end. But yeah, I think like at that point in time with Lennon, but between that we had like Strachan's team, Mowbray, and then even like Brendan Rodgers' teams didn't have that sort of camaraderie. So I think I'd say Lennon's probably had the closest to the O'Neill one, and that probably comes from the fact that Lennon played under O'Neill. Yeah, so it probably came from him.
And I think you're bang on there, Steve. I think we've kind of we're trying to toy with the idea of doing a sort of who would win, like a couple of spin-offs, future shows, who would win between the Invincible season for this or Angie's team, and obviously we keep mentioning about O'Neill's team as well. I actually think, although we had the treble winning year and the UEFA Cup year as well, and the 103 points in 2001, 2002, I accept that quite a lot of a lot of the players were there for the full 4 years, but this team, the 2003 fourth team, the double winning team, this is probably my favourite ever Celtic team. I'm a wee bit too young to remember the double winning team 88, and I was a wee boy when Tommy's team were entertaining, but just coming up that wee bit short. But that O'Neill team. I think ruthless was the term he described. Martin used to describe them that season. They were just, the minute they went to 6 points clear in the league, they wanted to go to 9, they wanted to go to 12, they wanted to go to 15. I think they were just so. They were obviously bitterly disappointed with how the season ended the season before. Obviously, it was great memories getting to Seville, but obviously we didn't win the trophy. And then obviously all the sort of drama of the final day, it must have been pretty sickening for them, seeing Rangers parading the trophy around after a 6-1 win against Dunfermline. I think they were pretty determined to say that it wasn't going to be 2 in a row at Ibrox, and my God, did we know put them in their place that season. A green and whitewash derby. Obliteration season where we won every game we played against them, on the way to winning a League and Cup double as well. So it wasn't a bad season all round. But in terms of the Champions League, it was the same old story, unfortunately, Phil.
Oh boy.
Group night, match day 6, heartache, and a dodgy penalty with a few minutes to go, which I will argue till I am green in the face was never a penalty kick. But we only needed a point. Get into the last game, Lyon were on 7 points, as we were, first and second. Bayern Munich were only on 6 points going into match night 6. Can you believe that? Oh, and wow. Anderlecht were bottom with 4 points. So all we needed to do was get a point. We would have won, or we would have went through as, in fact, not tell a lie, we would have went through as group winners because our head-to-head would have been better against Lyon. Wow. So we go a goal behind. We got free kick from Juninho, tipped onto the bar by Hedman, but then he sort of stayed at the post as it got headed in from Elber, and Lyon went 1-0 up. We got ourselves back into the game. John Hartson made it 1-1. Yep. Juninho, then the goal you were talking about earlier, Juninho hit one from, I think it was very near the halfway line, right into the centre of the goal, and it went under Hedman, which it just... I think it was almost the beginning of the end for him, really, at Celtic. Despite the fact that he'd had a good few games in between that was kind of, it became back to the same old story. But then, with 10 minutes to go, an awkward deflected ball bounced off Momo Salah right into the path of Chris Sutton. And it was 2-2 with 5 minutes to go before the penalty was given. And I think we were sort of saying it off air as well. What I've found about the first 2 seasons in the Champions League, they're very, very similar. We've got heroic defeat from a penalty in an away game. We've had the glory nights at home. We've had the terrible performance against the pot 4 side away from home. You felt like it was almost becoming a bit of a formula. But as heartbreaking as it was that night, you could still feel proud with the campaign that we'd had.
You could. I mean, this is the Bobo Balde handball, isn't it? Where he goes up for the header with an arm outstretched and it grazes against his arm. So, yeah, I've said this before, and I think every football fan must feel this is a natural thing. But I swear to God, Celtic must have the worst luck. We do concede the worst goals, especially in Europe. I know there's other teams might go, no, we do, and I'm like, I swear to God, Celtic. There's never a good goal scored against Celtic, like a 35-yard screamer right in the top corner. It's always something ridiculous, so we shoot ourselves in the foot. And there you go, with 5 minutes to go, Sutton does all the hard work, gets his equaliser. Momo Silva's even involved in the build-up for it. That's how hard we had to dig there. And then Bobo Balde, and even if, I'm just saying, you can argue it wasn't a penalty, but he gives the referee an option. He goes up for a header with an arm outstretched. And if it grazes against him, and it's like, of all the things to happen, this is so Celtic. And as over the years, you look back at some of the ridiculous goals we concede, and this is just another one to add to the list. We've done all the hard work, we're in a great position, and we just shoot ourselves right in the foot again through some ridiculous means. And yeah, this was a sickener to lose. Yeah, overall, you can be happy with how we went toe-to-toe with some of these teams, but we're that close, man. So could be group winners, as you said. Group winners.
With 5 minutes to go, we were topping the group, and at full time we finished third. It's like,
God.
What more can you say? So, Stephen, it was heartbreak yet again for us in the Champions League group stage. But we did yet again, same as year one, finish third in the group, which, as fans know, it still does. It takes you into the Europa League these days. Back then, it was the old straight knockout UEFA Cup. I much preferred it when it was a straight knockout, I have to say. I think that made the UEFA Cup quite unique in that way. But we we're hoping from 2 years previous, we'd hoped for a decent draw, and we got Valencia, who'd been in the Champions League for the previous 2 seasons. First up this year was Teplice, which was, we took care of business quite straightforward at home. It was a 1-0 reversal over there, but again, similar to some of the other matches, it was just like Anderlecht, it was just a sort of consolation. But then we did get the glamour team from in the last 16, FC Barcelona. Maybe not quite maybe weren't the team that they went on to become, but that was still a team, like the likes of Ronaldinho. He was king of the Nou Camp back then. But you got any memories of that game, Stephen?
The one at the Nou Camp, we won 1-0, didn't we?
We won 1-0 at Celtic Park, and we drew 0-0.
Alan Thompson scored, didn't he?
Yeah. That's right, yeah.
I remember, I was watching that game with a friend, and I remember sitting, we were quite young, I think I was around 8 years old, but obviously you get the memories, you know what's going on the TV and stuff, and at that point, I got nerves and that, but even when you watch Celtic play Barcelona at that time, you weren't actually afraid they were going to get it doing. You weren't going, oh no, like you said, you got Ronaldinho, you've got all these players, all these world-class players who are escaping my mind when I wanted to come into it, but they're absolutely an incredible team. Alan Thompson again, what a player he was in Europe for Celtic. You know what I mean? Popped up with some vital goals, as you talked about, the header at the back post. He comes in the UEFA Cup, he scores against Barcelona. Again, baffles me how they didn't get more international caps, but we all know why, the ignorance towards Scottish football. But overall, I seen a video, you can correct me if I'm wrong, it was John Kennedy playing at the Nou Camp. Was that season? Please tell me it was.
It was, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Right. So he had so that was in the March, at the beginning of March, the away leg, and he had a fantastic performance that night. It was everyone obviously rightly talks about David Marshall's heroics that night, but John Kennedy was absolutely outstanding that night. But it was the international break just a few weeks later where he picked up the horrific injury. So
Romania.
He stars shone brightest in the Nou Camp that night, and sadly we didn't get to see too much of him after that.
This is what I was going to say. The video I saw, that the fight for every ball, the tackling, the absolute just attitude of the players to go in and win them balls against them world-class players. You see now, the new defendants standing off, keeping close but not sliding in or trying to get in front. These players were bang. John Kennedy especially, he was an absolute colossus that night. And even the times where it broke away, Henrik Larsson had a couple of chances. Yes, we were dominated. You're going to be dominated in the Nou Camp. But they go through, they have that confidence and have that, as Phil already said, that arrogance to think you could put a team like Barcelona out. It's incredible. And then at Celtic Park winning 1-0, it was the norm back then. It was the normal thing. Like, as you said, that was a good word, by the way, juggernaut. That was a very good word, honestly. We were that type of team in Europe. Yes, we weren't obviously the best, but we fairly give things a go. And we proved it against that Barcelona team. And that, as you rightly said, Ronaldinho, unbelievable. Probably one of the best players in the world back then, if not the best player in the world.
Yeah, I would say he was at that particular time. Yeah, I think so. I think it was just, he was just so skillful, and but like you say, he's you could argue that he was Superman, but I would say, Phil, that maybe David Marshall had kryptonite in his gloves that night.
Oh man, the thing is as well, the first leg, there's obviously the halftime madness because the game was on BBC. They covered the UEFA Cup games, and I can remember at halftime, I want to say it was maybe Dougie Donnelly was still hosting at that point, and obviously he's they're talking in the studio at halftime. He says, "Oh, by the way, we've just had news of an incident in the tunnel." And turned out Rob Douglas and Thiago Motta had got into a scrap in the tunnel at half time, and it was like both of them being sent off for the second half. And it was like, I remember that my first thought at the time was, who's our sub keeper? Because this boy Marshall had never ever played for us. Because we still also had Hedman, who'd also fell out of favour. I think Javier Sanchez Broto may have still been on our books, but he wasn't on the bench that night. It was this youngster, David Marshall. So he comes on for the second half. But Barcelona also had Javier Saviola sent off in the second half. They went down to 9 men. But Thompson scores a goal. It's like a nice cushioned header into his path, and it's like a scissor kick, wasn't it? Like he goes a side scissor kick and volleys it in. But it was phenomenal scenes, and obviously hold on, get the win. So we played a half with a rookie goalkeeper in, and of course we still had some league games between there. So Marshall just basically dropped back out of the team, and Douglas was back in for their games. And Neil didn't think, right, this boy's going to have to play in the Nou Camp. I may as well give him some game time. No. His first actual start was in the new camp, and there was one save in particular quite early on where he gets right down, I think it's Xavi or Iniesta's feet, like he's right on goal, and he's got no fear and just gets right down there and just jumps on the ball before he can get a shot away. And it was like that all night. Every time they were coming forward, it was like pure, oh my God.
Wasn't there a save in like the first couple of seconds when the ball was dinked over and one of their players ran onto it and he comes out and just smothers it? He was just fearless. Incredible.
That happens. That moment happens in about the first 40 seconds of the game. We were still getting our drinks in for the bar, getting ready to go sit down, and we were like, oh my God, man, this is going to be an absolute annihilation. And but no, it was a fantastic performance for David Marshall, and maybe it didn't quite work out for him at Celtic, and but he certainly, like so many other players, maybe like Tony Watt, their name's going to be synonymous with a great performance against the Catalan Giants. So yeah, it's he's always welcome back. I just hope he doesn't kill one of the games when we play against Hibs.
Do you think sometimes that can kill a player? We see it with Tony Watt. Obviously, we know that obviously Marshall and him are two different characters. Marshall's obviously going to have a better career, but sometimes it's interesting to see that high and then they just keep going down and down, isn't it?
That's it. It can be like the sort of meteoric kind of shooting star kind of sort of episode, really, isn't it? But like you say, two very, very different characters. Tony Watt's very much the extrovert, and David Marshall was quite a quiet guy. But sadly, their careers certainly at Celtic kind of went in the same way. But our rewards for our magnificent performance against Barcelona, or two magnificent performances against Barcelona. It was getting to that point we were really starting to talk about we were maybe going to be going to back-to-back UEFA Cup finals. That was the sort of
I definitely thought that
feeling at that time, yeah. And we drew Villarreal, who are kind of one of the lesser known teams for Spain, shall we say, to be respectful. But needless to say, maybe it was our Celtic Feyenoord moment for the 70s. Maybe it was this team's version of it, because we realised just how good a side they actually were, Phil, and they held us kind of similar to Boavista. They held us to kind of suffocated us to a draw at Celtic Park. Henrik scored the equaliser that night, his last goal in Europe for Celtic. But over there, they kind of really stamped their authority. It was definitely one of our poorer performances under Martin at Celtic, and they, rightfully went into the semi-finals. But so the dream did kind of. The dream of back-to-back UEFA Cup finals did die that night, and you could argue that maybe we've still not quite hit the same height since. We've never won a knockout game in Europe since this season, which I think maybe tells its own story. But they were that O'Neill team were an absolute, as I said, we used it earlier, juggernaut. They were a machine, weren't they? They bulldozed anything or most teams in their way. They kept the trophy cabinet overflowing and gave us racked us up some air miles on the town. It was, they were a fantastic team.
Oh, without a shadow of a doubt, my lifetime definitely, arguably the best sort of team in terms of overall quality. Yeah, Brendan Rodgers' team was hoovering up the trophies left, right, and centre. But the quality of the teams compared side by side, the O'Neill one is phenomenal. And yeah, but what you're saying there about the back-to-back UEFA Cup finals, it's like I thought so. See, when we dropped into UEFA Cup, we got by Barcelona. And taking considering who we beat the year before the Youth Cup, I felt bulletproof. I was like, we'll beat anybody now. And Villarreal, that was my first exposure to Villarreal. I hadn't really heard of them, but much like Lyon, they had that one talisman, Juan Roman Riquelme, who he was an absolute baller. One of the best number 10s of that era. And they just saw us out, no problem at all. And again, maybe the players themselves went in with that attitude after beating Barca and what they did the year before, and thinking, well, we've beaten Barca, Villarreal, we'll see them aside. But no, they were a very decent. And the similarity you said with the Boavista game the year before, they were quite stodgy in the home game at Celtic Park. They were really hard to break down, and it took a Larsson equaliser. But out there, we just didn't really do any damage to them at all. We definitely underrated them, I think, safe to say.
Absolutely. That's a great quote for Egyptian King. They were the Avengers before the Avengers, absolutely. Stephen, it just came to me here. It's maybe something that we maybe need to keep in focus with regards to this year's group stage, because we've had an absolutely fantastic first hour against Real Madrid, and we've managed to put a point on the board away from home so far. And do we think we have to be very, very careful, especially if we do perhaps pick up a point or maybe something even better in Leipzig? Maybe I'm even highlighting the point here that I'm already sort of saying we're at least going to get a point in Leipzig. It's very important that we don't take our eye off the ball, because we've went to Shakhtar and put a point on the board, and we can't just be thinking that we've got 6 points banked at Celtic Park. We have 2 games coming up. We've got to treat, obviously it's what Ange does, we treat each game as it comes and give it our full attention, but we have to make sure that we don't underestimate any of these guys, because we have to say that Shakhtar, Leipzig, Celtic, although we maybe are we're without doubt the biggest name out of the 3, but that doesn't stand for much in terms of football these days.
Well, I mean, if you go back to the Villarreal game, I think a wee bit of complacency set in. I think Phil alluded to the fact that if you're beating Barcelona, albeit one of our players to be arrogant, but sometimes that kind of mentality gets set in, being like, we've beat the big dogs, who's Villarreal, so to speak. But then you get introduced to the likes of Riquelme, who went on to be one of the best midfield players of his generation and a number 10 role as well. I think Monty alluded to the fact he was always a player I signed, a championship manager, a football manager. Yes. So he was absolutely fantastic. And it kind of is similar to this season. You're right to point out, Anthony. If you look at the fact we went to Donetsk, albeit Warsaw, they couldn't play in their home country because we all know what's going on there. But we get a respectable point. Me personally, I think it was 2 points lost, because I think we could have been more clinical in the game. We could have won that game. But again, that's another discussion which we had previously in the podcast. And you look at Leipzig, these games come up away in Germany, and we can't take our eye off the ball, because they have the likes of Timo Werner up top, and Kunku, that the fella who is highly sought after in European football. It's by no means feat going to be 6 points banked at Celtic Park. It's going to be 6 points we have to work hard for and go after and be on the front foot. And in Germany, I want a draw or a win. I will not accept a defeat, because that for me spells the end of our hopes in the latter stages of the Champions League, and it'll be a dogfight for third place. I want to keep his momentum going. I want to keep us challenging for that second spot for as long as we physically can. Like O'Neill's team did, as you said, ruthless. They wanted to be 6 points, 7 points, 8 points clear. In European football, they wanted to be there to take part and not just to make up the numbers. And I firmly believe Postecoglou is setting that mentality into the players to do that, because you can see it. The Real Madrid game was one of them games where they were smart in their thinking. They let us waste our energy for 60 minutes and then just sunk us 3-0, boom, bam, bam. That was the game over. Absolute top ballers doing that. Against Donetsk, they did it quite similar, but not to the same scale. We kind of huffed and puffed, and they hit us in the counter attack. Their player, Modric, the left winger, who's going to be an absolute machine in European football. He's incredible. What a guy. But we need to be there and lose the mentality of going, we're so happy to be at the top table. Oh, thanks very much. Give us the money, UEFA. Let me milk you for the money. We need to be there to take part, challenge for second place, and go at it, and make us, like O'Neill did, a force in European football again.
Well, there we go. I think Big Ange should just get Stephen in that dugout or in the dressing room before the next game, Phil. I think we would definitely make sure the players know what's expected of them. So, guys, that's more or less done in terms of we've looked back over what was a very memorable, but unfortunately, but it didn't end in any glory in terms of the Champions League. And we had a good, honest run in the UEFA Cup that year. But just before we finish off, I'll come to yourself first, Phil, and then I'll let you sort of round it off, Stephen. But I felt it wouldn't be right to not have a little sort of mention to a player that really did light up that Champions League campaign in Liam Miller. Like we say, to coin a phrase from Mika Richards, he sort of burst on the scene that season, and he started off. He scored against Arsenal in a pre-season friendly, and he'd sort of broke into the team, and he'd impressed. He'd scored a few goals in the league, the likes of Dundee United and Hearts. But like the real good players, it's when the lights came on brightest that he shone. He came on in a League One at Ibrox, played very well. Mm-hmm. And then in the games in Europe, that's where we really seen just what a talent he was.
Without doubt, now we talk about players that don't sign for us and say they're the ones that got away. He's a player that we had, and he was another one that got away. Had a great what could have been moment. Obviously what happened at the end of the season. But you can't blame the lad. Man United still, come and call, and you got to do it. But what a player he was, and it was such a shock out of nowhere few years ago, and he was in his sort of mid-30s, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm 37, so that just shows you, when I heard that news of him, it was cancer. I was just like, I mean, I lost my mother through cancer as well, and it's not anything you want to experience at all. And yeah, when I saw that story a few years back, it's just a real shock to the system, because in my mind, he's still that, full of life, young or early 20s would have been at that point, scoring the goals against Lyon and Anderlecht, stuff like that. So it was an absolutely devastating story. And but what a player he was when he turned out for us in that season in particular. And then probably again, it's a case of young lad, no fear. Same with David Marshall later in the season, young lad, no fear. Again, they just know how to play one way, and it's he's an absolutely tragic story. But the memories that he left with us for that season in particular, phenomenal, man. Brilliant.
I echo every word of that, Stephen. Phil, sorry, and yeah, Stephen, I'll leave it to your fellow Irishman to sort of round it off. But sort of, he was a talent. He was a special talent. There's no two ways about it. And obviously, there was a section of support that, showed a lot of animosity towards him when he made the decision he did. But it can be if you're, I obviously grew up a Celtic fan, but like most Irishmen, Manchester United were, his other team sort of thing. And when the likes of Sir Alex Ferguson and Roy Keane, who was still in his pomp there, sell you the dream of you being the long-term replacement to work alongside. Darren Fletcher was coming through at that point. I think that was the initial. They were going to be the two that were going to take over that United midfield. You can't really blame anyone for making the decision they did. It's just a shame that it didn't quite work out.
I mean, when you look at the supporters, the Saxon fans that kind of went at him for moving, I think that goes back to the point they knew how good this guy was. Losing talent like Liam Miller, coming from Ireland, probably one of the best prospects to ever come out of Ireland and go to Celtic and then further his career at Manchester United. Yeah, we can all grumble and moan saying he moved too early, but if Alex Ferguson, and I don't like United, I've made that pretty clear in other podcasts and stuff, but I'll give him his dues. If Alex Ferguson is there watching company and a young Liam Miller takes his eye and he wants him, and Liam Miller wants to go to United, then he's going, regardless of your allegiances. He wants to further his career and all that type of thing, and albeit it didn't quite work out for him the way we all hoped. But he was a fantastic talent, and in his years at Celtic, he broke onto the scene, coming into European football, being fearless, being that guy who actually gets goals in Europe. Playing an experienced midfield with Lenny and Petrov, and he was the guy going up and scoring against Lyon and scoring in the qualifiers, showing his worth to the team in the actual league campaign as well. He was absolutely fantastic. And Sean Mack here, he went too soon, unfortunately, 100%, like we're alluding to the fact. But again, you have to go back to it. United knocked the door. You're going to think about it, regardless of what you think. The guy was phenomenal for his age, and obviously losing him that young, a horrible disease like cancer is horrendous. It's horrendous, and I can only wish his family well, his friends well, and just kind of, do you know what I mean? Just a fantastic player, gone too soon, and he played really, really well for Celtic Football Club, and that's all we can ask for. An Irishman lived his dream.
Absolutely, and we can only the one thing I suppose for us, and obviously his close loved ones can have the memories that he did when he was playing for us. Like we say, we've discussed on the show, he was just a special talent, and he certainly left his mark at the club. And but guys, that's pretty much us for tonight. My thanks again to our Bhoycie bus buddy Phil McGinlay for joining us tonight. Have you enjoyed yourself coming on, mate?
Always do, mate. Always do enjoy being on the Endless Celts, and of course, going back in time and reminiscing is definitely my thing. So, yes, I'm always quite happy to be on, mate. Thank you very much for that.
No problem, mate. We'll happy to have you on any time. Might be for going for the Rewind series. We've maybe calling your services a few times. But we've got a few. As I say, this is the second one we've did. We've obviously got a few more to actually do. But hopefully, obviously with the World Cup and stuff coming up, there's not going to be much in the way of Celtic content, so we'll hopefully get through them a bit quicker than once every 5 weeks like I've done so far. So the next time we'll certainly advertise it in plenty of time to make all the viewers aware of it. It'll be season 2004-05. We lost Henrik in 03-04. We lost Martin at the end of this season, where we took on the likes of AC Milan and Barcelona in the same group. And
Of course.
a team that became our famous top four buddies in Shakhtar Donetsk. We had our first encounter
Yes.
with them. It wouldn't be Celtic if it wasn't for an absolutely awful group stage draw. I mean, Barcelona and Bayern Munich in the same group. What can you do? But that'll be for another time, guys. And Stephen, I'll hand over to you just to sign us off, mate, with your usual phrase, and maybe just say a bit more about the sponsor, again, just for anyone that never caught it at the start. Thanks again.
Well, 100%. 100%. Great show, Anthony, by the way. Thanks, Phil, for coming on. It's a pleasure. If we look, the Super Six is back. It's felt like a long time since football's been on, so take advantage of it if you're in the league. Join the league as well. There's plenty of opportunities to climb that table. Our mission is to knock off Sean Ross and knock off Franny Cardi at the top. Let's get them off. Let's get the scores in early if you can. Beer 52, our show's new sponsor. I mean, I just finished that. It was absolutely incredible. If you can see it there on the top, it was incredible. Nice pale ale beer. Get a lovely magazine. You visit beer52.com/Celts to get your free case of beer. You cover your postage. That's it. You can cancel anytime. They send you out leaflets. They send you out 8 beers, either light, dark, pale, mixed, whatever you want, because I'm an ale drinker. I love it. So get involved with it. And as we always say, until Friday, stay well and keep safe. Hail, hail.
Hail, hail.